What's up, everybody? What's going on? Welcome to another episode of the Lead From Here podcast. I'm Jason. Today we are talking about trust, and actually this is going to end up being a week of trust. The next couple of videos are going to be about trust because I've gotten a lot of information about trust thrown my way via emails and people reaching out. A lot of questions around like, what does trust look like? How do I build trust? How do I rebuild trust? How do I know if my people trust me? And that's what today's episode is actually going to be about, is about how do I know if my people trust me? And this is an interesting topic because a lot of people just want to be like, what do I do? Like, how do I get to know if they know? Well, I can tell you that even if they trust you or don't trust you, they're going to say the same thing. Because if they don't trust you, they're not going to feel good saying, I don't trust you, because that could put them at risk. So asking if they trust you is not a good idea. It's not going to get you any real information. So instead of that, pivot to, hey, what do you think's working in the team? What do you think's not working in the team? What would you do differently? If you could do anything differently in the team, like what would you do differently with it? What do you think about me as a leader? And again, this one's going to be loaded because if they don't trust you, they're not going to tell you. So be careful with that one. I would probably save that for a few one-on-ones or meetings later. But focus on the things that they can control. Like, hey, is there anything that process-wise you would change? Is there anything you would change about the way that we go about our day-to-day business? And whatever they tell you, get to work on it. And this is something that is hard to do because sometimes those ideas are going to be very complicated to implement. And sometimes people won't necessarily agree. So it's important to also agree. And this is a very fine line. Don't ever say that's a bad idea when they're giving you an idea. Don't ever say that won't work. Don't shoot down their idea. Always say, thank you for that feedback. I will definitely look into it. I'll talk to some other people about it and see what we can do about it. And then follow up with them and say, after talking to people, the idea probably would actually end up causing more pain or make us go a little slower because of this X, Y, and Z. Or this was a great idea. Everybody loves it. We're going to implement it starting now. That is really how you change and find out if people trust you, is you just get to work. Trust and trust building is in the action. If you're not taking action towards building trust, you're not actually growing the trust. You're not becoming trustworthy. So as long as you're in action, you are building trust. As long as you're taking the things that they think are good ideas and getting feedback and communicating and working back and forth, eventually they're going to trust you, because when they talk to you, you solve the pain that they're bringing to you. So at some point they're like, I know that this person takes care of this. Now you can easily break that by again, tell them it's a bad idea right out of the gate, never implementing anything, and not following through. So follow through, take action, you'll start building trust. The next thing, and it's complicated, and something that I don't ask a lot of people, or I wouldn't necessarily recommend to everybody, because it takes a very large amount of self-awareness. You have to really be self-aware and be able to be truly honest and a little hard on yourself to be able to implement this next piece of advice. So take it with a grain of salt. If you're not that person, that's okay. There's no judgment in any of this. But it's important to understand what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And if your weakness is self-awareness, if you're not a self-aware person, or you struggle with being open to your vulnerabilities, the next piece of feedback is not for you. And that is, ask yourself, are you trustworthy? If your immediate answer is yes, think about it deeper. It's always easy to say, yeah, I'm trustworthy for sure. Of course, like most people are going to think they're generally trustworthy. So ultimately you have to ask yourself, if you're trustworthy, how do you act when you're not around your team, when you're with your peers or your leaders or executives, in meetings with other team leaders and meetings with other departments? Are you the person that takes the blame, or the person that gives the blame and shows the blame and pushes the blame down on the team? Are you the one that takes the credit, or are you the one that gives the credit? Who are you outside of your team meetings, outside of your one-on-ones? And you have to ask yourself this and be very realistic about what that looks like. And if you're not being realistic and you are pretending like everything's good when it's not, that's on you. And while that may have been a working strategy to this point in your career, at some point it's going to blow up in your face, because people understand and eventually will hear about what you're doing. So it's really important to also look inward and say, am I being trustworthy? And if you're not, you have to start making the choice to be a leader. Lead, take the blame, give the credit, and move forward and build up your team. If you're the team's protector and you're looking out for your team, you're doing the right thing. If you are your team's person that is always talking bad about them, it's just not a great spot to be. So I would, if I were you, change. If that's the situation you want to be in, you still want to be a leader, long term, that's the way it needs to be. So that's it. Outside of that, it's action. Just be in action, support your teams, and continue to grow yourself. That's the best way to know if you have trust, ultimately. So you will never actually know, like with some people, they'll just kind of always keep it to the close to the chest, or they're not going to tell you exactly how they feel. But if they're bringing problems to you, and if they're telling you how they feel, even when they're frustrated and just kind of venting, like, then you know that you probably have at least some trust. And the more you are there and support them and help pivot their thinking and get them into a good mental space, the more they will trust you. But until you are getting that feedback, continue to stay in action. Continue to do the things you say you're going to do and be in it for your team. Hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, hit me up at jason@leadfromhere.co. If you did find this helpful, please like, subscribe, follow. I would appreciate it. Take care.